Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast, and this is episode 20 of Raising 10. You can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. Go to my website, which is edfranklinnolimits.com, no dots, or you can hit me up on social media. If you have a guest, you would like to be a guest, or you just want some other information, or you have a suggested topic, never know. So always say this, I have a great guest on today. And his name is Scott Shepard. We met on LinkedIn of all places, and we just kind of started talking to each other. And he posts a lot on LinkedIn, and he posts really good stuff. I always enjoy watching his posts. And I never usually do this, but I'm going to read a little intro for him because it kind of encompasses everything it does. So Scott Shepard is a passionate father, environmental educator, and leader dedicated to expanding equitable access to the outdoors. With over a decade of experience working with students, teachers, and communities from pre-K to adulthood, Scott brings a rare blend of parenting wisdom, educational insight, and deep commitment to environmental stewardship. So I couldn't have written that better or said it better. I used AI, by the way. I cheated, but I used it from his podcast. So Scott, welcome to the podcast. I really appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for the warm introduction.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great things. There's 3 or 4 things about you that I'm interested in that kind of attracted me to you. So one was this outdoorsy attitude you have. And we talked about did you sail around the world or something when you were 16, or did you tell me that?
Yeah, when I was 16 years old, I left home to live on board a tall ship called the SV Concordia, and
Uh-huh.
nearly circumnavigated the globe. We crossed the equator twice, crossed the Pacific twice, went through the Panama Canal, visited some really
Wow.
amazing places. Super
That's,
pivotal in
that's
my life.
16 years old.
Yes, sir.
So Scott is a native of San Diegan too. The other thing that attracted me is you have kids and you're applying what you've learned to your parenthood, right? A lot of times, some of my guests may not have children. I had one guest on. It was an awesome guest, and we talked about he's a mediator, but they never had children. And I think children add a lot of dimension to your life, good and bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's nice that you have children. You have probably had kids about the same age I did. And I thought that was cool. And then, like I said, you have a lot of insightful things you do on LinkedIn. So listen, let's just dig into it. And Scott texted me today or sent me a message on LinkedIn to talk about kind of the direction he thought it might be a good idea. So you sent that over to me. Open that up and we'll kind of have a conversation about that.
Sure, yeah. I think the first thing that was top of mind for me was the transition that I experienced as a young dad in my identity.
Okay.
Um, I think I had already built a lot of identifiers for like how I saw myself and who I thought I really was.
Yeah.
And dad wasn't necessarily included in that list of identifiers for myself. Like I really saw myself, like you said, as an outdoors person, as an adventurer, as a surfer. And initially, when I found out I was going to be a dad, I was really, really afraid that I was going to have to compromise some aspects of my identity in order to become a father. And what I've learned is that that's really not the case. You know, like my identity as a dad kind of sits on top of the pyramid of all of the other aspects
Right.
of my identity, and it like works both ways, where like as an outdoors person that influences how I act as a father, and as a father that's how I act in the outdoors. So that's
I
kind of
think I agree with you. When you become a father, you start to go, first thing you do is you get scared and you're not going to be able to do any of that other stuff, right?
yeah,
Surf and go out and do all those things. And it's funny when
exactly.
I hear guys tell me, "Oh, well, I golf every Saturday, and when I get married and have a kid, I'm golfing every Saturday." Well, probably not, because
Yeah,
kids get fevers and they yak on your shoes and they do all kinds of things. So I'm not saying that you're never going to go golfing again, but you might want to just readjust that because kids are going to run your schedule a lot of times. And yeah,
yeah.
your kids are old enough where they're probably playing sports and they're doing other activities outside.
Absolutely. And then you're like a chauffeur, you know, you're driving
Right.
the taxi cab from place to place. I had a mentor tell me, many, many years ago, that in life we're constantly juggling, and there's all these different balls in the air.
Yeah.
Some of those balls are rubber, and some of those balls are glass. So the rubber balls we can just like allow to drop and bounce at our side. Maybe we'll pick them back up again and throw them back into the air with all the other things that we're juggling.
Yeah.
But our kids are really glass balls, and if we drop those relationships, they shatter. And we can repair, we can seek to repair, but oftentimes, it's just so much more challenging to rebuild that relationship after it's been broken.
Yeah. So there was this doctor on Mel Robbins one day. I was watching her podcast, and he was talking about that every child grows up in a different environment than the other one, right?
Absolutely.
Because time changes, education changes, financial situation, everything changes. So that child's getting a different view of their parents because they're evolving, hopefully.
Yeah.
And I was the youngest of four, so I definitely grew up in a different situation. And there was resentment towards me from my brothers and sisters because of that. But it wasn't my fault. I didn't know.
Yeah.
But my parents' life changed and it changed for the better. So I was able to take advantage of that, or got to reap the benefits of that, I should say. I didn't take advantage of it. But yeah, there's no owner's manual when you have a child. So the first thing out of the gates, I was kidding about changing diapers and how humbling that is. At some, here's this macho guy surfer in your situation, and I don't do that, bro. And yes, you do, because when you're if you're there with the children and something happens, you got to take care of them. And it's humbling. It's also sweet too. Like you get to that's a kind of an intimacy too with your child, that you get to take care of them and do all that cool stuff. So you did a lot of, and I'm going to get back to what you wrote over to me today, but
Yeah.
something that impressed me is you did a lot of counseling and work with kids, um, at schools and things like that, and adults apparently. Kind of engaging the outdoors, kind of getting them away from the technological things. And I didn't have that situation when my kids didn't have social media when they were, impressionable. They obviously have it now, but they're all adults. In fact, I told you I have three kids older than you. So, um, how is that dealing with kids and getting them away from that technology and getting them into the outdoors?
It's really interesting right now because we are starting to see around the globe people starting to take on a new perspective as it relates to social media,
Mhm.
particularly in childhood. Like we've seen the social media ban in Australia. We're seeing potentially a social media ban for young adults in the UK. There's a New York Times article that just came out this week about an entire town in Ireland that is working together to make sure that children don't need to have social media or cell phones in order to engage with each other.
Yeah,
Um, and what I found really interesting about that article is just how the community is coming together to create third spaces for kids, like not home, not school, somewhere else, where they can get together and they can engage with each other. And in my life, I've always really seen the outdoors as a third space. You mentioned growing up in San Diego, like I spent all of my time with my friends at the beach. We were either body surfing or, doing flips off of the dunes or playing music on the lifeguard tower. We were
yeah.
always at the beach
Well,
because
that
that was
was
just,
that was my childhood, right? We didn't
yeah,
have it, so we were outside.
absolutely.
I mentioned to
And
you in a conversation we had Lords of Dogtown.
yeah,
So when I
totally.
watched that movie, that is when I grew up. I
Yeah,
remember the pools being emptied. I remember getting in pools with our skateboards. Now it was probably illegal what we were doing, but the fact is we were out. When I was a kid, if I needed to ride somewhere, I was SOL. My parents said, "You have a bike, you have a skateboard, go. You
yeah,
can take the bus, you can do whatever you want." My mom worked in East San Diego down at that Kmart at 54th and University when I was a kid when
yep,
we moved here. And they had Home Avenue had a skateboard park. Steve
yeah,
Cathy was the pro down there, and she would drop us off at the skateboard park, and we had to make our way back to her at work before 5 o'clock, or we were stuck in San Diego for the night. Never
sure.
got stuck, by the way. But my kids, like I said, didn't have as much social media, so they were able to go outside and do a little bit more, and we encouraged that too. And we surfed and we did, we rode bikes at the beach and we camped a lot and things like that.
Yeah,
But I like that you're doing that with kids now.
absolutely. And what I was getting to before was parents in my generation are not hearing that, the beach is a safe place for their kids to go hang out by themselves. They're not hearing that the world outside is a good place for their kids to go explore independently.
Hmm.
Um, so we really need communities to come together to help make those places safe again. We need to ensure that our messaging is communicating that like these public outdoor spaces belong to everyone. They're places where everyone belongs.
Right.
And I guess the other thing is like as frequenters of those places, we need to make sure that we're being accepting and welcoming of the rowdy group of teenagers. You know what I mean? Like we can't be shouting at them to get off our lawn.
Right. Right. Better,
We're out in
better
a public
there than it,
space.
yeah, stealing
Exactly.
something somewhere.
Yeah.
I in addition to those bans on social media in certain areas of the world, this most recent punishment to Meta or Zuckerberg or whatever was is groundbreaking because
Yeah.
I think I heard somebody talking about AI, how we should really be in competition to see who can make it the safest, right? Instead of seeing what we can do with it, let's see how we can constrict some of the things that it's doing. And we know the damage. We can, we can see the damage that can happen. And
Yeah.
we need to be having companies coming out and making safe AI or whatever the answer is.
Sure.
And I think that will happen. It's kind of like when we had the internet boom in the 90s, everybody was freaking out and it regulated itself eventually, right? There's still some things that I think that they could do with things that kids have access to that they could limit that. And I'm sure some people are working on that. The problem is I see as your age parents is the parents are on social media all day,
Yeah.
right? So I'm going to the gym and I was there at 5:30 this morning and I have not kids because at 5:30 the kids aren't there, but I see adults my age, maybe middle age on their phones between every set.
Yeah.
And they're doing that at home. So what are we teaching our kids about that this is more important than that conversation we should be having with them?
Yeah. I totally agree. I think it was James Baldwin who said, "Children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them." So, as
Great. That's
parents of
great.
my generation, we really need to make sure that we're modeling safe screen hygiene. You know, if
Yeah.
we want our kids to be outside, we have to be outside. If we want our kids to be healthy, we have to be healthy. Um,
I had
so,
this conversation the other night. My granddaughter had a thing at school, so we went. It's like an open house. So we met, and I met this guy, and we were just jabbering around, and we were talking about this exact thing about kids. The kids playing sports, and we're going out there, and like I'm going to go. She plays basketball now, so I go an hour early to get her to
mhm.
watch her, and then I want to play a little bit with her. I was a good basketball player, and it's fun. I haven't picked up a ball in a long time, so she's kind of encouraging me to get out there. But yeah, we were talking about this very thing, and I did a podcast recently about who's raising your kids. Are you doing it, or is media doing it?
Yeah,
There's a guy named Matthew Kelly who's just kind of the self proclaimed dynamic Catholic, and he talks about the worst problem Catholics have is that we're letting people tell us who we're supposed to be, and
sure.
that goes into any area, right? We're
Yeah,
letting the media tell us that the kids they're safer doing this, and we're the parents. We need to stay in control.
yeah. I would definitely agree. I mean, uh, like if we look at data around childhood development,
Hmm.
children before the age of 10, the person who's most influential in their life is their parents. But by the age of 10 or 11, the people who are most influential in their lives are their friends. So, in that really sweet spot before the age of 10 years old, we need to make sure that we're modeling the best behaviors possible, so that those young people can adopt those types of behaviors into their lives before they become so impressionable from the world outside of the home.
And I was lucky in this respect that since my wife and I met later in life, and our kids were we had kids from like 3 to 10 years old. A lot of our fun stuff was when the kids were like up to 16 years old. So
Sure.
we were spending a lot of time with them, riding bikes, surfing, doing all those things. So we kind of got lucky in that respect. But um, yeah, so that like that podcast I did, and I was reading some statistical information the other day about fathers and how much they think they're involved versus the reality of how much they're involved. And it's not, it's grim. It's a little bit grim on how father, like you're obviously an exceptional dad. You're spending time with your kid. I don't know if you're good at it, but you're spending time with them and you're trying, right?
Yeah.
Using your education and your reading and you're doing all these things. Most dads aren't doing that. They're just going to work and thinking that they are just slugs, and they don't get the respect that they want and all this. Well, they need to earn it too and take it.
Yeah.
And that's that spending time with kids. And it's I don't ever want to exclude mothers. Mothers are the best, man. My mom was
Yeah.
kept our family together, but it's different. Your wife has a different relationship with your kids than you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody said recently that like mothers, the relationship is really turned inward. It's about that relationship between the mother and the child. And
Yeah.
with fathers, the relationship is turned outward.
That's a
It's
good way
like
to put it.
let's get on this bike and go out into the world. Let's go
Yeah.
try this thing outside. Even like you see dads walking around holding the baby facing outward. They're showing them the outside world and creating a space that like models how to engage with that world. Um, one thing that you said is really interesting. I think uh, the way that people approach fatherhood is really changing with the change in generations. Statistics show that millennial fathers, like 8 out of 10, feel this really, really intense need to be perfect. And that includes things like engaging with their children. It includes things like uh, having a stable income to be able to support your family. But it's also like raising their personal expectations for themselves, sometimes beyond their own capacity and beyond their own reach. And we as millennial dads need to accept, like, hey, there is no perfection.
Yeah.
We show up every day, we try our best, we love our kids, and that's as close to perfect as we're going to get.
Well, it's I would think, and I agree with everything you just said, Ed, but where are they getting the standard of perfection? Right? Where's that coming from? So our parents, I don't think my parents cared if they were perfect parents. I mean,
Yeah.
not and nothing against them.
Hmm.
I parented a lot out of guilt because I was married twice and had 6 kids, 3 with each wife, and then so now I'm parenting from a guilt standpoint, right?
Yeah.
But I loved spending time with my kids, and I even love it more now because I'm not doing it. It really drives me crazy that I don't have that action in the house and the responsibility to go. And now I see a lot of fathers, young fathers, at my granddaughter's school when I go there because they're all like your age, and I feel like they're engaged, but again, they're on their phone all the time too.
Yeah.
And these kids are this goes from kindergarten to high school. So a lot of these parents that I run into, my daughter's in granddaughter's in 6th grade, so I'm seeing older parents now or older kids. And you're right, they have disengaged a lot, after that 11-year, 12-year-old child. But like I said, what's the standard? So my son-in-laws spend a lot of time with their children, all of them, and my
Yeah.
son spends tons of time with his kids. So I'm proud of them for doing that. And I'm not saying that they're perfect by any means, but they have some desire to hang out with their kids, which is awesome.
Oh yeah. I think that that's like clear that millennial dads in particular are really, really focused on trying to find time to spend with their kids and to make time to spend with their kids. And your question about like the standard of perfection, where does that really come from? Ironically, I think a lot of it does come from social media because we see other people posting the best moments of their lives,
That's a good
you
point.
know? And we're comparing ourselves to those people. The other thing I think about is this is kind of funny, but Bluey is this incredibly popular show now on Disney Plus that so many young families are watching together. And
I
I've
don't know
seen,
what that is.
oh, it's a
I'm
cartoon
sold.
show from Australia about
Okay.
a family of dogs, but the dad is like an ideal father.
Okay.
And the episodes are only 15 minutes long. So every dad has perfect down for at least 15 minutes of the day, but who knows what else is happening when we're not watching,
That's
you know?
funny.
So I think there's an element of that, and then I think there's also an element of millennials are one of the highest college education generations in the United States, like in history. And we've grown up expecting to be able to study and master a skill and then graduate. But we don't graduate in fatherhood. We don't master fatherhood. It's a constant changing cycle of skill sets that we need to develop inside ourselves and ways to approach unique and changing situations. So that's another thing that I think about is like when people are reaching for this standard of excellence, I think a lot of it comes from like, well, in our lived experiences, we've been able to master this, master that, master this, and move on. But we don't move on from being a dad.
Well, see, I think that's one of the reasons that I wanted you on the show is because you will pick up a book and go, huh, I never really thought of this. I'll read up on it and see if it makes any sense to me. A lot of fathers don't do that. I tell my kids all that because they'll take them to Disneyland and they'll do all those things, and spend thousands and thousands of dollars. Your kid just wants to be with you. I got news for you. They
Yeah.
just want to go to the park and have you push them on the swing and sit in the sand, sit in the mud, sit and do those things. That's what they're going to remember.
Hmm.
So the other day I was at a cathedral high school down here, and the coach from San Diego State was talking, and he's a Catholic, and he took his kid golfing, and he put on some Bluetooth music in the cart, and his son, like 12 years old, asked him to turn it off so they could just chat. I mean, that's you know, it almost chokes me up just saying it because that's just amazing. So I have this time with my granddaughter in the morning where it's about a 20-minute drive. And I miss this with the kids where I get to talk to her, just talk to her about whatever. She went off on some weird tangent today. I wasn't listening. No, just kidding. I was listening. But she brought something up that she hadn't really talked about before. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool, that she's opening up to me. And it was a little bit personal, but not too much. That's where you really want to get with your kids, where you can sit in the mud with them, right?
Yeah.
And let them give them permission to tell you things that you may not necessarily want to hear.
Hmm.
That's
Like
really important. I did a podcast on that too, where you got to what are your kids not telling you?
totally.
Yeah. And if they tell you something like, and I know I've yelled at my children when they were growing up, they'd tell me something. I'm like, God damn it. Why did you do that? And I could have handled it 100 ways different.
Yeah.
I said, well, I probably wouldn't recommend that again. And this is why, it's kind of dangerous and blah, 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 blah. And, but give them permission to open up to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
that's a
mean,
huge thing.
you mentioned, my background taking kids outside, working with like teens and young adults, and the car is such a sacred space for
Yeah.
deep and meaningful conversations. I can't tell you the number of times that I was sitting in a 15 passenger van and just unpacking rich, deep, meaningful details of these young people's lives and just holding space to listen, you know? Even if there was music blasting in the background,
Yeah.
those relationships were forming through conversation. And like what an opportunity that is, just sitting in the car.
Yeah.
I today with my 11-year-old, I'm starting to see him really, really open up in that space in a way that's different from the home. It's different from the park. It's different from going for a hike together. Like something about the car is just magic.
We had my daughter came over last week and brought her two little guys, and I raised her son. He's 19 now. And we had a really good, it's nice when you can talk to your kids when they're adults too, by the way. You'll see that.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you stuff that, yeah, you do not want to hear, by the way. But, I was no angel either when I was growing up. So I can kind of relate in some aspects to what she's telling me.
Yeah.
And what I really love about what's happening with her, she's had some issues in her past that she's searching, right? She's asking questions. What if? When people start searching like that, they generally can find themselves. It's when they're not saying anything is when I think you need to be nervous because now they're keeping everything internalized.
Sure.
You need to listen to that. You need to encourage your kids. And like I said, sometimes it's just shutting up and letting them chat, right? Just
Hmm.
letting them bleed out and then not being judgmental, right? We know we
Yeah.
say that with our friends, but we judge our kids too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
That's a
he's
really
being
hard
told
thing.
all kinds of stuff that you don't want him to hear,
Yeah.
but it gives you an opportunity to contradict those things if they're necessary to be contradicted, like, whatever the topic might be. Listen, communication is key at everything, every relationship. And I always used to tell salespeople there's three things we're going to concentrate on. Expectations. We need to know, and this is with your kids too. They
Yep.
need to know what you want, and you need to know what they want. Then you got to communicate those expectations. And then you got to have the discipline to keep those expectations. And those change, by the way. And we don't tell people sometimes when they change, especially in like a marriage. We don't tell the woman or the guy. The woman doesn't tell the guy, "Hey, I this has been something I've been thinking about for a long time. Could we handle this differently, or whatever the case may be?"
Yeah. I mean, my expectations on myself have certainly changed as I've had more kids, and
Mhm.
like we have three kids now, and like I try to uphold an expectation of having one-on-one time with each one of them as much as I possibly
Yep,
can.
and it's hard times. Yep,
Absolutely. It's a balance. It's a struggle, and sometimes I'm not going to meet my own expectations, but I think that goes back to what we were talking about with the idea of perfection. We have to be willing to accept the fact that like, hey, we're doing the best that we can, and if we remain consistent, we remain positive, we continue to show up with love, like that's better than the alternative,
sure.
certainly. I know you also like talk a lot about leadership. You're talking about sales, and the National Outdoor Leadership School, I'm going to paraphrase, defines leadership as uh, timely and strategic actions to set and achieve shared goals or objectives. And in a family, uh, we're constantly, each one of us in the family, taking on leadership by taking timely and strategic actions to set and achieve our goals. Whether that's like my son waking up early and brushing his teeth and putting on his shoes so that he can get out the door on time, or whether that's me holding space in the car to have a conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of like everyone being on the same page around like what is it that we're trying to achieve here? What is it? What is our objective? Are we trying to get to that mountain? Are we trying to, you know, get an A on this test? Like what's the goal for our family? So that's another thing that I find myself thinking about a lot is identifying the goals and how to articulate those into expectations.
Well, you've probably seen my post on a ground truth leadership audit. So the whole basis of that was that I've gone to work for companies, and when this leader will have a set of a mission statement, or they'll have core values, or they'll have all these things they want. A lot of times, it does not get down to the lowest person in the place. So I worked for a big box store for the holidays just temporarily, and they made it a point of bringing up these core values that they had, this mission statement. Never again did I ever hear it. And it was never told from mid management down to well, there's no difference in a family. You just
Mhm.
said it. Everybody's got to be on the same page,
Yeah.
right? Because if I'm expecting this and you're, doing something completely different, all that's going to generate is anger, probably with a child,
Mhm.
especially if it's a boy. In my experience, I have seven daughters. So I expected different things from my son than I did my daughters.
Sure.
Why? I don't know why I just said that, but it's true.
Yeah.
And listen, I was reevaluating myself on a regular basis, going, man, I handled that incorrectly. My One of my daughters came downstairs once and wasn't dressed appropriately for school, and I said, get your ass back up the stairs, get changed, and come down and eat. And I ruined her whole day by being an asshole in the morning. And then I had talked to her about it later, and I could have handled that 100 different ways. Honey, you're too pretty to have to dress like. You don't have to dress like that. We could send you in a potato sack, and you're still beautiful, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's all retrospect, right? That's all Monday morning quarterbacking now.
Yeah.
But you and the other people that listen to this are around your age have an opportunity here to understand about communication with their kids and how important it is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, like thinking about that particular example, it reminds me of the times in my life where I need to reflect on my own emotional regulation
Yeah,
and like, holding myself to the same standard that I want to hold my children to.
right.
If I expect my son to speak to me respectfully, I better speak to him respectfully. If I expect my son to manage his emotions and work through, challenging experiences or feelings, I better do the same. And again, like I don't do that perfectly every time either, you know. Um, but the more that I learn, the more that I try,
Of
the
course.
better it is. You know,
Well,
you
that's what
mentioned, sorry, go ahead.
that's why I like you, because you are willing to go, okay, hold on a second. Let me stop here. And you don't have to read a book to figure it out, but you can at least think about it and go, yeah, that's probably a better approach. And let me tell you something. As far as I'm concerned, and I've said this since day one, this is my, 28th episode in this raising 10 and raising 8 genre. Your relationship with your wife is paramount to your success as a parent. And it
Hmm.
goes back to those expectations. If you're talking to your wife crappy, they're going to talk to their relationship, other half crappy, right?
Absolutely.
We have in our family, and I don't have a perfect marriage or anything like that. As far as I'm concerned, it's as perfect as it can be. We get compliments from our kids about our relationship and how we handle things. And it's just as little as something saying thank you. She makes me coffee every morning. And I always tell her thank you, for doing that. I don't have to, she'll make it anyway.
Hmm.
But just being respectful to each other. And I gotta imagine that you have a really good relationship with your wife just by the way, just by your demeanor. So that's
Oh,
super
thanks.
important. And it's what your daughters need to expect from whoever they get involved with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're 100% right that like the our relationships are modeling what healthy relationships should be. And so often, we're not modeling healthy
Right.
relationships. So it's important to just go back and reflect and try again. And I mean, my wife and I are having our 14th wedding anniversary next month.
All
So
right.
we got,
Congratulations.
thank
Great.
you.
Yeah.
We got married pretty young, and my dad always teases me, old enough to know better. Um, but like we've grown up together.
Yeah.
We've grown in a whole lot of different ways, and like I certainly didn't show up as a husband when I was in my early 20s the way that I show up today.
Sure. Well, none of
Um,
us did.
yeah, right. So I think um, those mistakes that we make, those errors or those flaws that we make are really just opportunities for us to learn and grow and to be better. It's a constant, you know,
If
status update.
if an individual identifies it, see,
Yeah.
sometimes, and I've had some doozies come over to take out my kids, my daughters, right? A lot of times I would tell them, look, well, they said, well, he'll change. I said, well, he might not change though. He might just get worse.
Yeah.
Right. I really, when I had my first daughter in 1986, it was 180 degrees turned. I mean, I completely changed.
Yeah.
I was so enamored with her and and all my kids that it changed my whole freaking life and 100% better.
Hmm.
Right. There was no emptiness. There was always something fulfilling. Whatever I was doing, if I had to go to work, even if it was not a great job, I knew, but it was a means to the end. I was doing everything for my family.
Hmm.
That's the hardest part now is I don't have a lot of those. Well, and COVID didn't help, but a lot of
Yeah.
those, I don't have a lot of that motivation in that respect. I have it, my own self stuff that I'm pretty motivated myself, but yeah, I mean, it's a whole other kind of tangent going off on that. But, you mentioned here too, it says, I definitely have some stories related to fears around becoming a dad,
Oh yeah.
feeling unsure and how to weigh in on my own identity. Tell me kind of why you wrote that.
I remember I was 24 years old. And my wife handed me a positive pregnancy test. And I still felt like a kid. I was like prepared to quit my job the following day. My buddy had inherited a sailboat that he couldn't take care of up in Ventura. So I was getting ready to pack up the car, drive up to Ventura and sail it down. I had this idea of like, oh, we're gonna go sail down to La Paz and live for a year on the boat, and then we'll go work a ski season in France and we'll ski bum and then we'll kind of figure out what we want to do. We had like just gotten married. I had just graduated from college. I wasn't settled on the ground. And then all of a sudden I felt this immense pressure to be an adult and to like to run the show.
Yep.
But not just that, I had this intense fear that I was going to mess them up because I felt like I wasn't a perfect person. And I had like struggled at school. I had struggled with relationships, particularly in my adolescence, and felt like, any kid that I raise is going to wind up so messed up just because of me, because I'm so messed up.
Right.
And that fear was so intense that it blinded me from the potential for joy, the potential for excitement and being a new father until I heard my son's heartbeat for the first time.
Oh,
I went
nice. Yeah.
I went with my wife to her first ultrasound appointment, and I remember hearing the heartbeat and seeing what looked like this like little gummy bear kind of floating around on the ultrasound, and
Yeah.
something changed. Like it was this very visceral moment of like, whoa, like I want to be a dad, and from that moment on, I my perspective totally shifted. I was still afraid of like, what if my wife dies in childbirth? What if I get lost on the way to the hospital? What if I, can't make enough money to for her to do X, Y, or Z that she wants to
Yeah.
do? Like
You
blah
start
blah blah
making
blah
up those
blah.
things in your head.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I had never held a child before. Like I'd held my younger siblings when I was, a young man, an adolescent, but I had never held a newborn baby. No one that I knew had children. You know what I mean? It was like we were these pioneers coming across this entirely new experience that no one that I knew had stumbled into yet. And it was very nerve-wracking.
So converse, I had when before I became, and I had some of those similar experiences. However, we grew up different.
Yeah.
And this isn't an insult to you. We
Oh,
just,
no.
I had nieces and nephews that I would babysit. When I was a kid, I remember telling my buddy, this kid is a chick magnet, so let's take him to Walmart or wherever, and girls will come up and talk to us because we have this cute kid with us, my nephew. So I had been around kids and I had done all those things, and it was just kind of a natural thing. If you get married, you have a kid, you move, you just work and this and that. I never really, I wanted kids so bad. I just never really was worried. I mean, once I had the kid, I was worried if it was going to be a dumbass. But coming going up to that, I was just excited, and I'm telling you, it puts a lump in your throat when you with those kids, right? When you hear
Yeah,
that heartbeat or when they're born. I mean, I'm gushing tears out of my face when my kids were
totally.
born, every one of them. And when my granddaughter does something in a play, and or like when she did her first solo, I remember, I had sunglasses on and I'm not, I don't want anybody to see I'm crying.
Yeah,
But those are all those little things that you go through as a parent. And this is why it's the best, most successful thing I've ever done in my life. Now, are all the kids perfect? Hell no. Some are still, a couple are still struggling and they'll get through whatever. And I can only do what I can do now because they're adults. But yeah, I mean, it changed my life completely. I never had that desire to travel or do anything like that, but I was definitely doing stuff that wasn't fatherhood stuff, right? Bars and all that crap. And
sure,
I used to work nights and I'd get off at 8:30 in the morning, get a six pack of Coors Light, get my surfboard, go to the beach, drink, sleep, surf, drink, sleep, surf, and then go home, take a shower, and go back to work.
totally.
That's when we could drink at the beach. You can't do that
Yeah.
anymore. But it definitely wasn't. I mean, it was, it was okay. I mean, it wasn't responsible living, but it was that I got to do that. But
Yeah.
once I had kids, man, it was just I worked two jobs. I, was going to school at one point. So, but I know you have those fears, and let me tell you, those aren't over. By the way, hate to
Oh, totally.
rain on your parade. It's going to, but you're more suited to handle it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. I mean, I still, you know, every time that I make a mistake or every time that I lose my patience
yeah.
or, you know, just show up in a way that I'm not proud of, I still reflect on those moments like, damn, I might mess this person up. But at the end of the day, like I really love my kids.
Oh,
And
I know you do. I can tell.
yeah, and they know that they're loved. They know that their dad shows up for them with love. And I feel like so many dads of my generation would do well to remember that their kids know that they're loved, and
I think
even
that
if they're not
sometimes,
perfect, that's okay.
I think sometimes dads think that, uh, well, they need to be their kid's friend. We've had
Sure.
this conversation before. They need to
Yeah.
be permissive, let them do anything they want.
Yeah.
We know that's not smart, right?
Hmm.
Uh, we have to say, my mom used to say, tell your kids no as little as possible, but if you tell them no, have a really good reason, right? Have
Hmm.
something it's either a danger or it's something like that. So I probably got to do a little bit more than most kids because my mom's like, yeah, I didn't drink when I was a kid. I had a job, I had a car, I didn't have tickets, So she was like, well, Ed's a good kid. Go ahead, have fun, be careful, call us. We didn't have cell phones back then, so call us before you leave where you're at. And so I was lucky in that respect. Some of my kids, I was a little too permissive, and some of them I was a little too hard on. It's just that I don't know. It's every kid's different. They got totally different personalities. How the hell 8 kids grew up in this house and they're all different now is
Yeah.
amazing to me, right? That they have all these different talents and things. That's a trip when the kids get older. You're like, how the hell did they ever come up with that? That
Yeah.
was never said in this household, but
Totally.
they hear things from out there, out in the world.
Well, what you just brought up is a really interesting point about like autonomy and permissiveness and trust and like how do we make parenting decisions? Like what do we root our decisions in? When do we say no and when do we
Yeah,
say yes? And that reminds me a lot of my experience leading programs in the outdoors because we're constantly assessing risk and we're assessing competence. So like this picture behind me was taken on a Knowles course that I did in British Columbia several years ago, sea kayaking and sailing. And at the start, our leaders were making all the decisions around where are we going to camp, what are we going to eat, how are we going to set up camp, where are we going to go today, how far are we going to go, how much water or food do we need to bring, yada yada yada. And slowly, as our competence grew, our leaders were able to give us the opportunity to make more risky decisions independent of them.
super important.
And I think what you just described is your mom did the same thing with you growing up. She saw you being a competent young man. You know what I mean? Not making poor decisions, being responsible, having a job, taking care of your needs. So she gave you that autonomy to go out into the world and to experience things. And I think a lot of the time as parents, we might not recognize how competent our children really are.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can give them the leeway to go and make their own decisions and have their own successes. My mom used to always say that she can't take responsibility for any of my successes or any of my failures. And I think like parents would do well to allow their kids to experience those independent successes and failures because they're the best learning and teaching tool imaginable.
So I hung out with some kids that were questionable character kids in junior high and high school. And my mom used to tell me, Ed, you can be a good example as well as they can be a bad one. And what had happened is when those kids came to my house, they were very respectful of my parents. Well, you didn't want to not disrespect my dad anyway, but they wouldn't, right? They were very respectful of my mom. They'd treat their parents like shit, but they never act up at my house.
Sure.
And they would say thank you and please and all that thing. And my mom's like, well, they're nice kids. I'm like, yeah, well, that kid right there just stole 4 cartons of cigarettes in his, jacket. And we went to school and sold them in the smoking area. But yes, they're good kids. So, but yeah, you gotta let your kids do some stuff. It's hard, man. When especially 10 to 14 years old, 11 to 13, it's man, shit can go down. And there's some little bratty kids out there too that you really don't want your kids hanging out with. But you have to say what my mom said. Look, you can be a good example too. You don't have to do the bad things they're doing,
Absolutely.
and you'll probably end up not hanging out with those kids. And I did, I still hung out with them, but I had a job and stuff. Like I was one of those kids. I was up at 7 in the morning. My dad says that skateboard does not hit the ground until 8 a.m., right? Because you're not going to wake up neighbors.
Yeah.
And then I'd go to work and I had little jobs and I did all those things. But this isn't about me. But so my parents, they got lucky with me because I had the other kids to watch, my siblings. and watch them be dumbasses and get yelled at. I'm like, I'm not going to get yelled at. I'm not doing that.
I was number two of four, so I was definitely one of the ones being a dumbass and getting yelled at,
Yeah.
allowing my younger siblings to benefit from that. But one thing that you mentioned, and I think it brings us back to like one of the things we started our conversation with, is like the world is really different today. And the messages that parents get nowadays don't really reinforce the idea that it's a safe place to let your kids go make mistakes and go be independent. So I think our communities would do well to come together and to demonstrate that there are safe places for kids to go and be kids, you know, and
Well,
for
it's
kids
funny
to
that
make,
we complain about millennials. We
yeah,
raised them. We raised millennials.
sure.
So, and then we bitch about them, and we're like, "Well, dude, it was on you, right?" Now, I met kids like you. This one guy came out and was like an AI expert, about your age, has a couple kids. I've been impressed with a lot of kids I've met, and not to be insulting, but I call you a kid because you're my
I
kid's age.
know.
And listen, and then when I was a kid, they were just dumbasses, right? My dad just says, "Look, there's dumbasses in the world, and there's kids that do what they're supposed to. Like you're going to go do what you're supposed to." My dad, I used to work nights when I got out of high school early. I didn't like high school, so I graduated early. He comes into my room one night at like Friday at 10 p.m. and says, "You got to go to work." And I said, "No, I'm off tonight." He says, "No, they just called and I told them you'd be there in 30 minutes." That was kind of how I was raised. Because if you want to move up, you're going to have to step up, right? And I had kids that did that. I have really hardworking kids and stuff. And I just think we were a little too easy, and this is my last podcast, a little too easy on kids. And now we're paying the price. So a funny thing about, when we were kids, you never wanted to get in a car with a stranger. And now we have Uber, who you get in a car with a stranger.
Yeah.
And we have all these other things. And I don't know, my grandson's only 19 years old. He'll walk home from work and stuff at 11 o'clock at night. And we kind of keep tabs on him, but he can handle himself. We live in a nice neighborhood. It's not, and anything can happen. Listen, but you can't control everything. So,
Yeah.
but you're right. I mean, if we were out there communicating, the parents communicating with each other and things like that. Listen, there's some parents that my daughter's friends, and I don't like the parents, right? But I don't keep her from going and hanging out, you know, with their friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to judge the child for the sins of the father,
Right.
nor do you want to restrict your kid from making relationships with people that they think are meaningful relationships to have with. The thing that I try to remind my kids of is there are people in the world who want to blow out your candle. They're going to come up and they're going to just extinguish your light. But then there are other people who really want to fan your flame and they want to see it burn brighter. And those are the people that you want to surround yourself with. And I think parents can come together and fan each other's flames to make it easier for our kids to go and have these independent, analog, hands-on experiences in the world, not just glued to a screen.
And see, I was kind of known for that when I was in business on a daily basis, that I was the one encouraging people.
Yeah.
I can't do this. You can do it. And I can show you how you can do it.
Hmm.
I listen to stuff every day at the gym. I don't listen to music at the gym. I listen to speakers talking about, you know, lighting that candle, fanning
Yeah.
that flame. And and you're right. I would want my kids around those type of people.
Hmm.
And I had a point to that. But anyway, yeah, you want to listen. I used to tell the kids, you tell me what you're reading and who you're hanging out with, and I'll tell you where you'll be in 2 years.
Sure.
And I used to ask my salespeople, when's the last time you read a book? Oh, I don't like to read. Man, maybe you should just, I don't know, grab a fiction book. I don't care what you grab.
Hmm.
I read, I don't know, 15 books a year. I listen to them primarily,
Hmm.
and it could be anything from motivation to, I don't really like fiction, so I'll listen to motivation. I'll listen to success stories, things like that. I read Donald Trump's book, and of course, I don't want to say that in public because people freak out. The reason the book wasn't good is because someone else read it. He didn't read it, but it had some really good points to the whole book. I
Sure.
read leadership books, business books, whatever I can do, and I encourage my kids to do. They even bought them books and sent them to them. Now, do they read them? I think they get caught up in their kid's life and don't. take time for that, space for education for themselves.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't underestimate the value of reading books with our kids. Like there are so many amazing books that can teach us lessons as well as our kids.
Yeah.
I think about like authors that I read growing up, like Gary Paulson or Craighead George or Christopher Paolini or J.K. Rowling. I mean, there are all kinds of different books out there that parents and children can enjoy together
Yeah.
that can help to instill some of those values of like resilience. I think toughness is one that you've brought up a few times, grit, um, but also like love, passion, joy, excitement, fun, adventure,
And
all
something you
the
brought up earlier about this um, false vision of what social media gives us to parents and to everybody else about these families. Well, I'm not there having fun like they are. It's not right. I mean, a lot of these people that post, I have a lot of Facebook friends, more friends in high school than I had in high school on Facebook.
sure.
And I know a lot of these people. And when they do post those things, I know, man, he's struggling. I can tell. Um, and maybe that's where we're getting, maybe these parents these days, that's where they're getting how they're supposed to be. And if they can't be that way, then they'll just, let their kids do anything. I don't know. There's so many pieces to being a parent, as you know.
Yeah.
And you're not even close to done, brother. So just,
Oh no.
yeah, hang in there. Ask your dad. He'd smack you upside the head just because he probably didn't do it one or two times he should have. And so like I said, you're not done. Well, dude, we've almost been on here an hour. You're amazing, dude. I really am impressed by you. I'll keep watching your stuff on LinkedIn. You're doing a great job, and I hope the people watching this, if they're not your age, and because a lot of my listeners are my age, I hope you get this podcast to your kids, because I think you impressed the hell out of me, and I appreciate you being on here.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. It's so awesome to chat with you. It's great to be a part of your platform. I really appreciate the opportunity.
I'm thinking we're going to do something like this again after 3 or 4 months of your posts and my posts on. We may come up with a whole nother genre to kind of talk about. Maybe it is leadership. Maybe it's how to create leaders in our life. So one of the things when I worked at this big box store, when I left, they came and gave me an exit interview. And they said, what would you do different in this company? Because I'd been around a lot longer than some of these guys that I was talking to. I said, I would not teach supervisors how to be supervisors or managers to be managers. I would teach everybody to be a leader, because it's a different mindset. Forget supervision, forget management. Those are just managing tasks. You need to create leaders, and so they have people a possibility, right?
Hmm.
There's nothing better than when you say to somebody, "You think you can do that?" And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, I think I could pull this off." That's a person of possibility, right?
Absolutely.
There's a way to be successful in just about everything. And if you don't like it, maybe that's why you're not successful. Sometimes, people like to open their own business and they find out all the work and they go, oh, that's too much work. Well, that's fine. That's a good decision then. You won't fail. And
Hmm.
other people go, there's no way I'm ever working for somebody. And those people a possibility. But one of the things in the interview on Saturday that I had, the guy says to me, well, what would you do in this conflict situation? I said, well, it's just about people. Maybe they had a bad day. I don't know. I would stay even keeled, right? A good foundation. And he asked me about 4 questions. I said, I don't mean to keep repeating myself, but all these situations are just about me staying focused and foundation and have a good foundation. Not getting upset, not getting overly excited, just kind of saying, okay, what do we need to fix to make this thing work? That's what you do with your car. If your car breaks, you go, well, where's the noise coming from? Well, it's coming from over there. Well, let's look over there. You
Hmm.
don't change the fucking tires if your car's missing, right?
Yeah,
You fix the missing. You don't need to
sure.
change the tire. So,
Yeah,
again, that's another tangent, but I appreciate you being on here, dude. Like I said, I'm impressed with you, and I will send you all the information from the podcast, the links and everything like that. But stay on for a second. Let me do an outro and
sure.
get going. So this is the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast, Raising 10, episode 20 with Scott Shepard. Great kid. You guys can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com or edfranklinnolimits, all one word.com. That's my website and any of my social media platforms. And I will see you all soon. I'll do another podcast next week. if you have any ideas that you want to, topics you want to cover, I'm up for anything. So have a great week, and I'll talk to you all soon.